chapter 4, and we'll be looking at verses 46 through 54. John chapter 4, verses 46 through 54. John chapter 4, verses 46 through 54. And the title of the message is What Faith Looks Like. What faith looks like from John 4, 46. Now I'll start with a question. What is well-pleasing to you? What is well-pleasing to you? Is there anything that you enjoy, something you like to do, that you're just like, oh, this is the life? Maybe for some of you that might like ice cream, maybe there's a favorite Stewart's ice cream where just something about putting that ice cream on your tongue, you're like, oh, this is good. And then maybe you're not saying well-pleasing, but what's well-pleasing to you? For some of us, maybe it's just a big old tablespoon, I get them all mixed up, teaspoon, tablespoon, the big fat spoon of your favorite ice cream. For some of us, maybe it's a long motorcycle ride, right? Maybe there's someone here that says, you know what's well-pleasing to me? Just being able to jump on my hog, no distractions, just me in the open road, being alone in your garden, right? Maybe that's something that's just, this is the life. You know, no husband, just me in my garden, no one to bother me, no kids, no grandkids. Some ladies, you might say, snuggled up to your husband on the couch, under a blanket, watching your favorite show. What's well-pleasing to you? Well-pleasing, as in like, this is the life. This is good. What's well-pleasing to you? Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Hebrews 11, verse 6. The Bible says, and without faith, it is impossible to please God. And so that wording there, if you were alive back in the author of Hebrews, just know that it's easy to slip and say Paul, since Paul wrote most of the New Testament, but we don't know who the author is. You know, there's some theories that, it was Paul. There's some other things that says, Hebrews doesn't look like and read like what Paul would have written. So whoever the author of Hebrews is saying if you were alive and, and heard it, most people couldn't read. So if you heard it read to you, it sounded like this. And without faith, it is impossible to be well-pleasing to God. That kind of, where God kind of like puts his favorite ice cream on his tongue and, fill in your name, Mildred Pete, is well-pleasing. Without faith, it's impossible to be well-pleasing to God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it's impossible to be well-pleasing to God, like you in your garden, you at home with a hoagie and a beer and the game on, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Today's message deals with the topic that God himself, through the author of Hebrews, says is a must to be well-pleasing to him. Here's our passage, looking at what faith looks like. John chapter 4, verse 46 through 54. Remember, as I'm reading, try to use your mind's eye to imagine what it looked like back then. That's okay if you don't have them wearing what they wore. I know, and shame on me. So many people have told me, you got to watch The Chosen. You got to watch The Chosen. I want to watch The Chosen. I just never get time to. But it's okay for you to imagine, and the beauty of The Chosen, and those of you that might be following that series, is it does give you a good, accurate look at what the clothes look like. But it's better to use modern day actors or just your best ability. Try to use your mind's eye to picture while I read along and while you read there. So here's John 4:46. Once more, he visited, talking about Jesus, Cana in Galilee. So Galilee was a district, an administrative district or region that the Roman government set up, kind of similar to our states. So your Lord grew up in Galilee, the region of Galilee, Jesus the Galilean. Cana is the city, our town in Galilee. Once more, he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum, another city. Capernaum, and I always joke, and I'm a hypocrite, everyone should have a Capernaum. Capernaum appears to be the Lord's kind of getaway place. I have two co-workers from Rochester, and they crack up when I say that, my official retreat place is Rochester. It's been a while since we got out there. And so my friends who are from Rochester, and I always tell them, if I won the lottery, the first thing I would do is buy an apartment or buy a little house in Rochester. And they're like, not London, not Paris, all the great cities of the world. So I just love getting away to Rochester. There's something about the hills, the people. It's just a nice, relaxing getaway. You should have a Capernaum. So Capernaum was located on the Sea of Galilee. So it's kind of like Saratoga Springs. It was on a lake, only that's a big lake. But anyway, everyone should have a Capernaum. You might, think of a place where you can get away. For my wife, it's Myrtle Beach. But it's good to have a place where you can just get away and recharge. And so here he is. So Jesus, a certain royal official's son who lay sick at Capernaum, kind of like this resort kind of getaway. I think it's Pontius Pilate used to get away there to relax. Jesus loved to go there. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. Imagine if that was you and it was your son or your daughter. Unless you people see signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. Right? Going back to, you guys were all tripping out when I turned the water to wine, and you just want more signs and wonders. The royal official said, sir, come down before my child dies. Please, I'm begging you, just come see my son before he dies. Verse 50, go, Jesus replied, your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he, this royal official, inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, it was like yesterday, I would say about 1 PM exactly, the fever left him. Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. So he and his whole household believed. This was the second sign Jesus performed after coming from Judea, a region in the south, to his home region of Galilee. Right? So again, a powerful story. Again, where he says the royal official said, sir, come. Jesus replied, your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. The big idea, right? The sermon in the sentence today is simply this. We must live lives thoroughly characterized by faith in order to please God. We must live lives thoroughly characterized by faith in order to be well-pleasing to God. The way you feel with your feet up and the Mets game on and a beer in hand, well-pleasing. The way you feel when you're in the garden and you're like, oh, this is life. The weather's great. My petunias. I'm impressed that I knew what that was. I don't know where that came from. I mean, my petunias are looking good. This is a good day, right? We must live lives thoroughly characterized by faith to be well-pleasing to God. And here's a picture of Abraham and taking his family. And I would say, just remember Abraham, if the Bible was giving out awards, like it was at the Oscars, if Oscars were given out for biblical characters, God gets leading actor. So it's not David, it's not everybody. But if there was a category for best supporting actor of the Bible, it would go to Abraham. Right? So in my humble opinion, but a lot of people way smarter than me would agree, and maybe not. In my humble opinion, Abraham is the most significant person in the Bible not named Jesus. You're Irish, you're Italian, you're Black, whatever you are, your butt knows Christ thousands of years later because of God keeping a promise to this man Abraham. So Abraham is the poster child of faith. If faith, Hebrews 11, had a hall of fame, there'd be a large exhibit on just Abraham. The encouraging thing has nothing to do with the message. The encouraging thing about Abraham, the poster child of what faith looks like. Talking about well-pleasing. Abraham, the most significant person in the Bible, not named Jesus, the poster child of faith. The encouraging thing to us is, as many of you know, if you have anyone infected by 9/11, even Abraham had many major lapses of faith. So the good news is the standard that God puts on us, sure, it's perfection, but he also understands that we're frail, that we're made of dust, we're fallen. So Abraham, poster child of faith, to this, what's going on in the Middle East as of yesterday? So Abraham, one major lapse of faith is he clearly knew, and again, he's the poster child of faith. This picture is when God first appears to him and says, go to a place that I'll tell you about, pack up all your bags, go to U-Haul, I'll tell you where you're going when you get there. So Abraham, sure, let's go over here. Let's get going now. But a major lapse of faith. This is an encouragement to us that, hey, you may, doubt God at times. You may be mad at God at times. There's times where your faith is shaken. God is so merciful, so patient, so compassionate, so understanding you'll never know. So one big, this is a none of the message. Abraham's big lapse, as you know, is he's waiting, going on 25 years for him and Sarah, his wife, to have a kid. He knows that the promise was him and Sarah would produce a kid who would grow up into be a nation. The clock, think trying for 1 year is one thing. Think trying for 5 years is one thing, but it's flirting with 25 years and no kid at all. Sarah, his wife, but no, she's not the bad guy in the story. Just like Eve is not the bad guy. Sarah one day gets the bright idea, Abe, come on, we've been trying for 20-something years now. It's not working. Hagar pulls out a little black teddy. Why don't you put this on Hagar and head upstairs and let's see what God will do with her. It ain't happening with us. So Sarah's lack of faith, but the Bible points a finger at Abraham, who, okay, I guess, let's try. Come on, Hagar, let's head upstairs. Abraham sleeps with Hagar in a sign of lack of faith. That's thinking like, yeah, I'm not having a kid. She's young, she's attractive, and she was Sarah's servant. Maybe a nation will come up out of my union with Hagar. As you may know, yes, that did happen. Hagar is pregnant, gives birth to a son named Ishmael, who becomes the father of what are today's Arab nations. God says that, hey, your son's going to have conflict with his brothers, all the rest of the world. So the 9/11 attacks, again, is a product of Abraham's lack of faith. A lot of the conflict in the Middle East, people are dying today because of Abraham's lack of faith. So that was just one big lapse of faith. So that I share that as an encouragement that you can still be an incredible man or woman of God of faith and still have moments where you're like, man, God ain't doing nothing for me. He's not going to come through. All right. So again, Abraham here is pictured here, the poster child of what faith looks like. There are two principles about faith that's well-pleasing to God that we'll explore today. Just two principles today very quickly. First, faith does not require sight. Faith does not require sight. The second principle we'll see is faith is sometimes rewarded without fireworks, meaning it's not this big display, awesome, thunder and lightning. Faith is sometimes rewarded without fireworks. It's not the big and the majestic and the mighty thing. All right, so here's the first principle, right? The big idea again is we must live lives thoroughly characterized by faith in order to be well-pleasing to God. You're not going to be perfect. There are going to be moments where you have massive letdowns of faith, but overall, when you die, the Lord is going to say that just generally speaking, this person was full of faith. Two principles, and the first one is faith does not require sight. We see that in verse 50, John 4:50. Go, Jesus replied, your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. Right? The man took Jesus at his word and departed. It wasn't, oh, Jesus, no, I appreciate you saying that, but come on, you still got to come with me. You got to come with me so I can see that it works. Right? There was none of that. He just simply took him at his word. It wasn't, well, you know what, Lord, like I said, I just want to see, make sure he's okay. Even after you do your spell, Jesus, or whatever you do, your hocus pocus, I just want to make sure it worked and it clicked. Can you just, stay with me for a couple minutes? I want to check to make sure the fever goes away. None of that, right? All those signs of sight. I want to see that Jesus, it worked. Maybe you just got lucky with the whole turning the water to wine. Maybe this might be a little too tough for you. Turning water into wine is one thing. But man, the doctor said there's nothing to do with my son. He's going to die any day now. I need to see that you can do it. I need to see that what you do is going to work. No, there was none of that. Faith does not require sight. The guy didn't need any kind of evidence, nothing to see. He just simply took Jesus at his word and departed. My mom is a Kentucky native who grew up most of her life in Indiana, but she used to always joke and say, particularly early in her life, and she came to know the Lord and have a vibrant relationship with God. But I remember when I was young, she would always joke, I might be from Kentucky and I live in Indiana, but I really should have been from Missouri, nicknamed the Show Me State. She'd always like, I'm a person you got to show me. And so, Dorian, you talk about stuff in the Bible, but you weren't there and nobody was there. How do I know it really happened? Right? So she always just struggled with the fact that she needed to see. Well, give me proof that Jesus was who he was. How do you know Peter walked on water? No one was there. You got a picture of it? So my mom used to always struggle with the fact that she needed to see. I should have been from Missouri because I'm a show me person. I should have been from the Show Me State. Again, fortunately, over time, God was helping her to give her the faith to see that, faith requires that we don't see it. That's what makes faith faith. Here's a verse here, 2 Corinthians 5:7. 2 Corinthians 5:7. If you're home taking notes, 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we live, so all of our life is characterized and marked by faith, not by sight. Right? If I can see it, it's no longer faith. We live by faith, not by sight. Hebrews 11:1. Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance, or think of the word evidence. Faith is the substance. It's the evidence of things hoped for. I'm hoping and praying that Mildred is cured from her cancer. I'm hoping that Pete finds a wife one day. I'm hoping for it. I don't have the evidence it's going to happen. Now, faith is the substance or evidence of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So two different passages where God is saying, hey, this is my universe. I call the shots. To be well-pleasing to me is to show faith. Faith does not require sight. It's no longer faith. If I just showed you what I'm going to do in your life, if I'm going to show you how I'm going to work in your grandchild's life, if I'm going to show you how I'm going to work in your daughter's life, then it's not faith anymore. But I'm well pleased when I see my children just believe in me. 2 Corinthians 5:7, Hebrews 11:1. Speaking of faith does not require sight, hint, hint, hint. Speaking of faith does not require sight. How do you break up two blind guys fighting? How do you break up two blind men that are fighting? You yell, my money is on the guy with the knife. The Bible is full of people who simply trusted and obeyed God without seeing proof for what God was saying. Again, the poster child, Abraham. And I can't imagine. I know the older I get, when I was younger, I used to I could live anywhere in the country. I could just pack up and travel. It would be fun to, pastor different churches all around the country. Now, as I get older, I like the fact I know where my barber is. I know where my work is. I know my stores that I like to go to. I know where my Five Guys is. When I go in, I know people. Everyone kind of knows me. My wife's on a restricted diet. When I go into Chipotle, everyone starts getting the food ready before I even have to say. Boy, I like the routine of community. Again, I said I have to get out of here to catch Colony, and my wife works in the Colony School District. I've coached a lot of the kids, and so it's nice walking in the gym and seeing, hey, I know this person, I know this person, I know this person. I can't imagine God appearing to me and saying, okay, you know what? Pack up everything, put in your resignation at work, put in your resignation here, just get up, and I'm going to tell you where you're going. I'd be, knowing my luck, is it Somalia? Are you sending me to Somalia? Where are we going, right? So Somalia, where are you taking me to? So I would be like, wait. So I'm just going to pack up everything tomorrow and just go. That would be really hard for me. Where are we going? Is it warm? Is it cold? Abraham had none of that. All he had was God appearing to him in a time and day. At least now, I've traveled a bunch. I've been around the world. So at least I kind of know what parts of the country look like. I know what Asia looks like. I had a hangover, not a hangover. I swear I didn't have a hangover. I had a layover. That came out wrong. I had a layover in Germany, not a hangover in Germany. I had a layover in Germany and been in different parts of the world. But in Abraham's day, they didn't really travel much. So it wasn't like he's been around. But Abraham hears God tell him, God appears to him, tell him, pack your family up, pack up everything, go to a place I will tell you. Abraham had no sight, no idea where he's going. Okay, here, we'll leave tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning. Abraham moved without sight. Noah, this is a part of the story you may forget because, one of my boys, even though we'd read the Noah story, Noah and the Ark tons of time, it must have been Noah, right? Noah loves hearing himself name in the Bible. I think it's easy to skip, and this might be a newsflash to you. When God appeared to Noah to build the ark, there was no such thing as rain. Right? So I don't know if you knew that. It might be a newsflash for some of us, or it's just like one of those things where I read it and I don't know. What do you mean there was no such thing as rain? So water would come up out of the ground and just moisturize the plants and stuff. So imagine God appears to you, telling you, and I know there's some comedians that have made jokes about that. Look, we're going to build this ark, and I'm going to flood the earth all over the place with rain. And you'd be, I'm sorry, what was that? You're going to flood it with what? Rain. If you're Noah, like, what do you mean by rain? And then so no sight at all, right? The man had never seen rain before, a sprinkle. And yet here he's obeying God that he's going to flood everything and it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. So I don't know if you knew that, or maybe you Well, I never caught that in the story. It's just one of those little details that's easy to miss. So Noah built an ark to prepare for 40 days of rain when there was no such thing as rain at the time, but he believed God, right? David, right, defeated a giant, right? So David was a little boy. He would have never seen somebody 9'5". Some say he might have been 9'7", right? And then again, what I've been showing the boys and what you need to know, it isn't just that Goliath was tall; it was strong too. Like, I can't remember. I think like the breastplate was 125 pounds. The tip of the spear, right? So the javelin spear that you throw, the tip of it was 75 pounds. How do you throw a 75-pound? So again, everyone thinks of Goliath as this 9'5", somewhere between 9 something to 10 foot, but he was strong, right? And so David would have never seen, how did he have the confidence that God was going to give him the victory when he's looking up at a 9'5", but he had to have been a muscular dude too. Right? David never saw someone that big and that champion of war. Are you like doubting Thomas, who like, Lord, I believe you can just let me, touch your wounds? Are you like doubting Thomas, or are you, right? Not your wife, not your kids, not your mama. Are you like this royal official, and that you simply take Jesus at his word? Are you someone that needs a sign or not? Are you a person of faith where you don't need a sight, right? The guy didn't say, well, Jesus, come with me. I got to make sure you're going to actually get there. And I actually got to see this works. When you do your little magic trick, I want to make sure it works. I need you to stick around for a couple minutes, and I'm going to make sure the fever is gone on my son. No, he just simply took Jesus at his word. Are you like doubting Thomas? Are you more like this royal official? If you would say, well, I ain't going to lie to you, I don't have a lot of faith. I got to see it. I'm like your mom was in her younger years. And then you simply ask God to give you more faith. You simply ask God to give you more faith. Yeah, Doran, I'm dealing with something, you don't know about it. We haven't had a chance to talk, but I know God's all powerful. I just don't see him being all powerful in the situation I'm dealing with. It's too complex. It's too messy. Just simply ask God to give you more faith. Second point of application is, be it obeying the Bible or something you have a peace about that God is going to come through. Do you steadfastly believe without any evidence? Someone to believe without any evidence. And here's the second principle. Again, the big idea is we must live lives thoroughly characterized by faith to be well-pleasing to God. Obviously, God loves you and accepts you for you, who you are, your doubtful life, sinful life, and all. But we're talking about that. And again, remember, God loves you and accepts you who you are. Even if you say, well, I'm not a person of a lot of faith, God loves you and chose you before you were even born. But we're talking about that. Oh, this is a life. The Mets are up. Jen and the boys are out shopping. It's just me and the Mets game and something to eat. So this is that kind of just well-pleasing. So again, to be well-pleasing, you have to have faith. We said that number one, faith does not require sight. It's not evidence or signs. We close with this. The second point is faith is sometimes rewarded without fireworks, meaning God sometimes comes through in the mundane. It's not the grand and oh, God was so awesome. The sky lit up and there was thunderclaps everywhere and trumpets blaring. Sometimes God just answers in the mundane. Faith is sometimes rewarded without fireworks. Now, that might be an encouragement to us who feels, I know God's going to show up when this, and this is some big majestic thing. Here it is, John 4:48. John 4:48. Jesus says, unless you people see signs and wonders, the fireworks, Jesus told him, you will never believe. Jesus rebukes the people from his own neck of the woods, his own community, for their desire to see fireworks, big miraculous signs, like what he did when he changed the water to wine. Like, I was like, Jesus, that's huge. We were running, I was at that wedding, or I heard about it. I didn't get invited, but I heard about that wedding where they were getting low on wine, and Jesus turned water into wine. Like, it wasn't grape juice to wine. He turned water to wine. Right? He rebukes the people who were listening in. He was talking to that guy, but also everyone in the room, to let them know that, hey, sometimes faith is rewarded without fireworks. Stop demanding these grand, miraculous things. Sometimes God answers our prayers or rewards our faith without fireworks. And here's what I mean. I'm sure you've all seen it. My heart breaks tons of times, right? You'll see in the news, in today's news, Pete and Mildred, parents of, making up something, in today's news, Pete and Mildred were indicted on child neglect charges. The child had some kind of sickness that a medicine would have cured, or a procedure would have. But the parents, no, we're just going to keep praying, and God, in a grand firework display, will heal our child from this disease, right? How many times have we seen that in the news, right? Where parents go to jail, or a kid dies, or a kid is suffering miserably, and then finally, the police come in and take the child away. What was happening there? And I remember one time seeing, it was a YouTube video where in the jumpsuit, the lady was explaining, I guess was it the deposition or whatever, she was saying that, well, I was, no, I was going to refuse to take my kid to the doctor. I was just going to keep trusting God until he showed up and healed my child. There was a person waiting from some grand fireworks, right? Yes, a grand firework display would be for that child to be miraculously healed of COVID. That would have been a grand thing, to no medicine, no treatment, no nothing. This is in the heart of COVID, I think, if I remember correctly. God could have showed up in this grand way, but also God answers prayers in the mundane, especially in the case of that kid. I think they were saying that, yeah, had they gotten to the hospital, they would have been able to get the antivirals and been on the breathing machine, and the child would have survived. But how many times do we hear parents neglecting or refusing to give their kids medicine, refusing to take the kid to go to the hospital? Why? Because they're expecting God to arrive in this big, grand way instead of a mundane, shot or 2 pills each day for a week. I'm talking to single people, right? So I realize a lot of us might be married, but my heart's always been with singles people. Speaking of, well, God's going to show up in a grand way. Sir or ma'am, a lot of times it's men, as we put so much emphasis on the looks. I'll start with Pete, again, hypothetical Pete, not talking about anyone. Pete, you've been praying and asking God for a mate. Here you have this person in your life right now, but well, God, she's awesome. She's my best friend. She loves the Steelers just like me. We watch Steelers game all day, but there's got to be someone else out there. She's your best friend. She loves you to death. She thinks you're the next best thing with God, but there's got to be somebody who looks like, what's my girl, Sofia Vergara. And, well, God brings the right one to me. She's going to look like Sofia Vergara. Right? You're looking for this grand, miraculous thing, and maybe God has put someone right under your nose. Likewise, ma'am, Mildred, have you been seeing this guy or dating this guy? And, well, he's a little short for me. I just always know I'm going to get this tall, tall, dark, and handsome. Tall, dark, and handsome. I'm like 2 out of the 3. I'm 2 out of the 3. I'm tall and dark. I don't know about the handsome. But all right, am I talking to someone, Mildred, and here you have this, man that you've been dating for a while. No, he's not 6 foot. No, he's not the most handsome guy. And of course you don't settle. Of course you don't, you want to be married. Song of Solomon. I know my boys are, they're at that puberty age now where, everything is sex and sexual stuff. So they're at that pre-puberty age. The boys were blown away when I said, of course God cares about sex. Sex isn't dirty. It's meant for marriage. But Song of Solomon is a sex manual. The Bible talks about sex? What do you mean? I'm like, yeah, it's a sex manual. I said, no, people will, what's that called? Clean it up and say it's God's love for the church. But no, there's some just, so just trying to get them to see that, they shouldn't feel bad over their sexual faults and sexual development. But so God dedicated a whole book on sex. God doesn't care about that. Of course he does. So anyway, I'm not talking about settling. Yeah, if this dear friend of yours, you're like, man, I do not want to rip his clothes off. I'm just nothing about him is attractive. I'm not talking about that. But you know who you are. If the Holy Spirit's speaking to you, oftentimes, I just wish God would bring someone to me. And here you've been dating someone or someone of your close friends, and he keeps asking you out, and you're saying no. But why do you keep turning them down? Oh, no, we're just friends. No, I don't want to go to dinner with you that way. Why? Ma'am, is it that you're looking for this grand miraculous? He's going to look like Brad Pitt, and he's going to love the Lord. Right. So maybe this guy isn't a saint and can't tell you the Greek word for this or the Hebrew word for that. But if he loves the Lord, and I always in single ministry, no, you may not find someone who went to Bible college and seminary. I want somebody who's going to be my spiritual leader. Well, all because the guy doesn't know the Greek word or doesn't have a verse memorized doesn't mean he can't be your spiritual leader. So the point here again is, are you someone that's looking for God to show up in this grand, miraculous way? There were no fireworks, and that the official simply was met by his servants, right? God answered and simply was met by the servants on the way back saying the boy was healed. The boy was simply healed at the time Jesus said he would live. There was no fireworks, no, fireworks reported by the servants. The boy was simply healed. Notice these two scriptural examples of why we should not always expect God to answer our prayers or reward our faith through big shock and awe stuff. Remember, was that Desert Storm or whatever Bush administration introduced, or was it Colin Powell? Shock and awe. Here's two quick biblical examples of why God answers your prayers, but don't be someone who just passes on the mundane, ignores the obvious things. Everybody around you, and that's where living in community help. Others can tell you, there's your answer right here. No, it's got to be shock and awe. Here's the first example. 2 Kings 5, 9 through 12. 2 Kings 5, 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 9. So Naaman, he was a military general. I'm trying to blank what country he's from, but he was a Gentile. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. I'm picturing him up on this, big, majestic, beautiful horse, and he's got all of his medals and awards and his finest, military clothes. All of his top officials are behind him on their horses. So I'm picturing this little bitty cobblestone street, and him and his entourage are taking up the whole street. So here's Naaman, hair, looking good, got his awards on, like I said. So he and his horses and chariots are stopped at the door of Elisha, the prophet's house. Elisha sent a messenger, probably a young kid, sent a messenger to say to him, "Hey, Naaman, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored and you will be cleansed." He had a horrible case of leprosy, right? So just picture, it wasn't Elisha that came to the door. So this little, picture this little 12, 13-year-old boy on up the door. "Hey, Naaman, right? Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored and you'll be cleansed." "Nice meeting you, playa." Shuts the door and goes back in. But Naaman went away angry, right? So here he's like, Naaman didn't even get to say anything, and then just the door shuts. This little, servant boy, go, shuts the door. But Naaman went away angry and said, "Doggone it, I thought that he would surely come out to me," Elisha the prophet. "I thought he would come out to me. Does he know who I am? I'm Naaman, the commander of this impressive military. You need to come out to me." I thought he was going to do shock and awe, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God. I thought maybe he would wave his hand over the spots and cure me of my leprosy. Doggone it, this is some are not Abana and Pharpar, two, we think, cleaner, more majestic, gorgeous-looking rivers in the land where he was from. Are not Abnar and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all of the rivers in Israel? This is baloney. Go dip 7 times in the Jordan. Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. And so here's someone who was looking for this majestic thing. Elisha didn't even come out, didn't do anything. He, you hear Naaman say, "Well, why didn't you just do that? Dip 7 times in a river? Come on." 1 Kings 19, 11 through 13. Right? So there was our first example where Naaman was expecting something greater. And so what happens is one of his servants tells him, "Man, come on, we came all this way. Just obey God. Just do what he says." And of course, Naaman obeyed and he was healed. There's a second example where God, really good example of how God sometimes rewards us for our faith or answers our prayer in the non-majestic way. No fireworks, shock and awe. 1 Kings 19, 11 through 13. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11 through 13. Yahweh said, "Go out and stand on the mountain." And this is talking to Elijah. And I think there's another thing where he's about to appear. He appears to Moses, puts him in behind a big rock, and now about to appear in front of Elijah. Yahweh said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of Yahweh, for Yahweh is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before Yahweh. But Yahweh was not in the wind. Right? That was majestic. Could you imagine you hearing that wind? I always notice people in tornadoes. It's always, I heard a comedian, "Why is it that tornadoes always hit people missing teeth?" And it sounds like a railroad truck, sound like a train. This comedian was talking about why do tornadoes only hit in trailer parks. But so I know that's not true. But you always hear that, "Oh, yeah, a tornado came through our town and it sounded like a train." Boy, if a tornado sounds like train tracks or train going over tracks, what was the wind that was here that was ripping a mountain apart, shattering rocks? But here's the thing, Yahweh was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. You can imagine the ground shaking like crazy, but Yahweh was not in the earthquake. Right? Two majestic, shock and awe things, but God wasn't in it. After the earthquake came a fire, but Yahweh was not in the fire. And here it is. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Right, so again, another beautiful verse where God wasn't in the shock and the awe and the grand of wind, earthquakes, fire, a gentle whisper. Are you missing God speaking to you today or answering your prayers because you're looking for something big and grand when God has answered it with something simple? Don, I need more money. The bills are just piling up. I need more money. I'm just praying that God just gives me a job working with Jeff Bezos right on his side, making about how much money he is. Or it could be more mundane that you got to pick up a side hustle, drive for Uber. Maybe it's simply mundane of asking your boss for a raise. No. I've asked God, let me get a job working at Amazon so I can be Jeff Bezos' right-hand man. Are you missing out on God speaking to you? Again, a lot of times in romantic relationships, no, I'm not saying to settle. Oh, good, Dorian told me to settle. If here's this person that's, dear to you, loves you to death, would be a godly spouse, why are you looking for, Raquel Welch or Sophia Vergara, when it appears God may have something more mundane for you? God may not heal that friend's chronic illness with a miraculous thing, but rather a mundane, daily taking your medicine. Right? So just know God sometimes rewards faith and answers without the grant. I know many of you have heard this, and it's always good to hear. Maybe a lot of you are like, oh, I know where you're going with this, but it's a good reminder. If you've not heard this, I'll close with this about God shows up in the mundane. A man in Schoharie was on his roof during the big flood a few years ago. He begged God to save him as the waters were all around him. A friend with a boat came by 30 minutes after he started praying. The man said, "No thanks, God is going to save me." 15 minutes later, the state troopers in a helicopter flew overhead. The man said, "No thanks, just keep on flying by. God is going to save me." The man drowned and in heaven angrily asked God, "Why didn't you save me? I had faith. You're supposed to have saved me." As you probably know where I'm going, God said, "I sent you a boat, a state trooper with a helicopter." So again, remember, God sometimes answers us in the not so miraculous and majestic within the mundane. Right? You and I must live lives thoroughly characterized by faith in order to be well-pleasing to God. We saw that faith does not require sight. Right? It's not faith anymore. If you got to see it, oh, no, God just got to make it really clear what job I should take. He should make it really clear on what I should do in this situation. Faith does not require sight. And lastly, faith is sometimes rewarded without fireworks. If I can be of assistance with the message, let me know. If there's something going on in your life utterly unrelated, let me know. And again, I do have to step out, but certainly feel free to call or text, and see you next Sunday. All right, so ready for our next thing? Help is on the way. Maybe midnight or midday, never early, never